Hey, I'm Tony Moreland, and this is POW, Podcast of Wisdom from the Samsung Developer Program, where we talk about the latest tech, new trends, and give insight to all of the opportunities available for developers looking to create for Samsung. On today's show, I interview Diego Lizarazo. Just like me, Diego is a senior developer evangelist here at Samsung, and I actually work pretty closely with Diego since we are both part of the developer program. Diego is a self-proclaimed tech geek, and he's all about coding. And I wanted you to get to know Diego a little bit because I've invited him to be a guest host on some of the upcoming podcasts where he can let his inner tech geek personality shine. Enjoy. So I am super excited to have Diego Lizarazo on the podcast today. First, let me ask, who is Diego?
A mystery man. I am a senior developer evangelist with Samsung, and in general, I'm a developer that likes to connect with people, that likes to talk a lot. So you're going to hear that during the podcast, during this episode, that you're going to ask me one thing and I'm going to answer like 20 different things because that's why I do what I do. I really like to talk. I really like to connect with people and to try to figure out the kinds of things that people really are passionate about. I really like to spend a lot of time doing things that I like and people kind of like notice, you know, and that's the kind of thing that I like to find in other developers. So I started my career as a developer. I still do coding, but in general, what I do right now is to use that technical knowledge to be able to connect with other developers and try to find their passion, the kind of things that really tick them and the kind of things that they really like to create.
So for those of you who don't know, both Diego and I are developer evangelists. We actually work together. We've been working together now for, how long has it been? It's over a year, I would say.
Yeah, over a year now. Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. So before you joined Samsung, were you already an evangelist for another company?
Yeah, I actually have been doing DevRel, developer relations, for like 7 years now. So different companies. The first time that I did it was with Microsoft, and then I had the same chance to do something similar with Red Hat and also with a company that right now, I don't know if you're going to be able to find that is CA Technologies. That one got acquired. And now, well, I've been doing that with, this role with Samsung for a little bit over a year, like you said.
So how was it that you actually first learned about this role at Samsung?
Well, at Samsung, I think I was looking for another opportunity. Like you said, CA got acquired. So I wanted to continue doing things on developer relations. And I started looking. And well, obviously, whenever you see something like a name of Samsung, that's going to pop in any search, you know. So it's such a big company and so influential that immediately is like, wow, developer relations with Samsung. So I immediately honed into that and immediately applied. And fortunately for me, it worked out.
Yeah, no, we are really excited when you joined. I will say Diego is an absolute character. He is so much fun to work with. But outside of his very outgoing personality, he is truly a tech guy. I mean, I am amazed at the knowledge that you have, that you brought to the team. I do remember during the interview process, you were the one of all the applicants that really blew us all away because you went above and beyond, already creating some great code as part of the process that we just said, oh my gosh, we need to have this guy. Now, something unique is that even though Diego and I work together in the same team, we are actually on opposite sides of the country. So I'm based in the West Coast and you are on the East Coast. So tell a little bit about why you're there on the East Coast, where you are, and how did you end up there?
Well, I am in Atlanta Metro, so in Georgia. I've been here almost 7 years. So I moved here for my first developer relations position. So that was the position that I mentioned with Microsoft, and they had an opening here, and I ended up moving. Before that, I was living in Texas. Before that, I lived in Michigan for a couple of months. Before that, I lived in Spain, and before that, I was living in Colombia. So it was kind of like a long road to make it all the way here.
And your birthplace is Colombia,
It's
correct?
Colombia. Yeah, I'm Colombian, and that's where I started my career. So that's where I went to school to be a developer. And then I started working as a web developer, so front end. Then I moved to Spain and kind of like did some consulting So that's kind of like working for, like a company, but you really like your client. In my case, it was telecommunication companies. So like for anyone that is in Europe, they may have heard like Telefonica or BT, so British telecommunication, and which one was it? Orange was the other one. But after that, I started like doing something a little cooler, that was being a game designer. So I had the chance to work as a game designer in Spain with a Spanish company. And the funny thing is that really while I was a game designer, that's when I had kind of like this big realization that I could do something else with my background. And is that as a game designer, you don't really have to program, you don't really have to code, but you have the chance to work with developers. So I was a developer. So I had to create game documents and talk with the developers, but also had to talk with artists, with publishers, with marketing. So I figured out like, I can take that technical knowledge and actually learn how to explain that to people that may be technical, may know how to program, or that have no idea about those technical issues or problems or aspects of a game. So at the time, it's kind of like, I don't know what to do with this. Cool. But later, like 2 positions later, when I moved here to the US, it was like, there's a position that actually, that's the entire point, like program and talk with other people. So
sure.
that really worked out.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the best things that you bring to the team is your ability to communicate. So not only do you have all this amazing knowledge when it comes to coding, but you do a great job as far as teaching. So I am super honored to work alongside you. So I have to ask you though, so do you do a lot of gaming yourself? I mean, do you play games?
Now, not as much, because most of the time, or I'm working, or my kids, that I have several kids, they are kind of jumping on me. Literally, I'm playing with them. So, and the other times that I have the opportunity to do something with games, usually I'm creating game demos, like small games and things like that. So I don't really have much time. I have a few like mobile games that I play constantly, but not like serious gaming like I used to do, like the times when I was single and I didn't have any worries in the world. And then the Xbox was filling my free time. That is not happening anymore.
So originally you were a gamer that coded, but now you're a coder that games
from time to time.
Free time. Got it.
Correct.
Oh, that's great. Tell me, you've been with Samsung now for a year. We've actually done a lot of events together. We've actually done some traveling together, which has been great. Went to Korea and both visited our headquarters there. We've been to many conferences across the US. I'm sure you've come across a few challenges. So tell me what are the biggest challenges you faced in your role here at Samsung?
Well, sometimes is the entire thing of trying to figure out what's the best knowledge that you can bring to a certain audience. So Samsung has a lot of technologies, and fortunately we have a lot of fans around the world, but sometimes some people are going to be more interested in some technology or another one. So I don't think we have anyone in the company that can know everything about every single aspect of Samsung. Well, obviously I have a focus like watches, smartwatches, phones, gaming, but sometimes some people kind of come and like, hey, do you know about this screen? And like, I didn't even know that we had that screen. Do you know what is the price of this other device? I don't know. So many times I have to kind of like go back and tell them like, look, let me check or give me your email and then I'll respond to you and I'll try to figure it out. Because seriously, Samsung is covering a lot of different technologies, just Samsung Electronics. But if you go by the broader company, and we have hundreds of thousands of employees around the world, so it's really hard to know every single aspect of Samsung. Other times it has to do a little bit more like with challenges in conferences and things like that. But fortunately for me, for Samsung, I think most of the conferences, most of the events, they have gone really well, and it's more like trying to figure out like what is it that people want to do, what is it that people want to talk about, and bring that content to them.
Yeah, and I have to agree with you, because when I joined Samsung as an evangelist, this was the first time that I actually not only was in a role like this, but the first time that I worked for a company. Prior to that, my entire career, I was just a self-employed freelance graphic designer. And that was my challenge, was when we were out at an event and someone would ask me a technical question that I just didn't know the answer, I felt like I was supposed to know that answer. So it took me a little while to understand that, you know what, you don't have to know everything. Yeah. Fortunately, we've got great contacts, and, pretty quickly I could probably get an answer for you. But yeah, as an evangelist, we're here to help teach, but sometimes we have to go do our little research ourselves to understand.
But it's, I think, part of like the fun thing, like what kind of questions you get during the conferences.
Oh yeah, no, and I love how eager you are whenever there's a new challenge that's posed to you, where someone said, "Hey, can we try this?" And you're like, "Give me a little bit here, and let me figure that out." But yes, definitely. So that being said, what is the best part of your role?
Those weird questions, those ones that you are kind of like, wow, I didn't have any idea that someone is even interested in that, or the people that come and tell you a really weird story, and that you are like blown away because like, wow, like they really are doing things that I didn't even know that you could do, so with Samsung technologies or other technologies. And I have had some developers that come to me and show me like a small demo, and then I even like wonder like, how did they do it? Like if I was going to kind of like start doing that by myself right now, I have no idea how to do it, or like it's going to take me some time, and then that kind of like forces you to say like, hey, what kind of thing do I need to learn next? And specifically with Samsung, I think we really get a lot of innovation. We get new devices every year, or sometimes even like 2-3 times a year. And then you are never short in terms of like, what is it that I need to do next? There's always something that you can do, some sort of like project, that it could be like a personal project, or it could be whatever, but you are always kind of like, you have something. It's not static. Even before we started like working under COVID circumstances, I think almost every month we were trying to figure out like, okay, what is the next event? What is the next conference? What is the next thing that we're going to do? And now it's like, okay, how do we do the same things without even like really reaching in person, like all the developers in the different communities. So it's always challenging. And I think challenge is one of those words that is quite interesting, because a lot of people see it as something bad. I usually see it as something good. If there's a challenge, that means that I have something new to do, something new to learn, and that I really like about my job and about this position.
It was just this morning that I was reading one of the comments on a tutorial video I'd posted on YouTube, mm-hmm. and the person asked like, so how do you do this? It was, he wanted to show the rotating progress bar on a watch, and I had known how to do it. I just hadn't put that out to the community yet. And I thought, you know what, this is a perfect time for me to do that. So I quickly just threw together another video tutorial, posted it to YouTube, basically just answering his question. But, here was a great opportunity for someone in the community to reach out to us and ask a question, and I'm able to respond right away with another tutorial video. So yeah, that interaction with the community is great, and also one of my highlights. You had mentioned a little bit about COVID and how it's affecting, the world, our group. So give me some specifics. How is that actually impacting your role and your challenges as an evangelist to reach developers?
Well, one of the things that I guess I would say that we're kind of fortunate is that at the beginning of this year, we were thinking about doing more events online. So we were already putting our calendar, and we were going to take it easy. We were going to figure out when to start doing that. So really the big change is that we had to accelerate that response. We had to kind of move to create content online faster than what we were expecting, but we were already in the process. So that's something that I think we're fortunate that we didn't have to come up with something out of nowhere. Like we were already in that process. But apart from that, it's a little bit weird not traveling as much as what we were doing, not having the chance of like going to the booth, Samsung's booth, and getting all these people. Sometimes like the randomness of a conference when people just kind of like walk by you and you're like, hey, you have like a couple of minutes to talk. That's something that you cannot really do online. But then you have other kinds of randomness, like the ones that we get on our YouTube channels or the forums or other things like that. So that, I think, is kind of like one of the biggest thing. The other thing is that I think right now everyone, after so many months, is beginning to get a little bit of like online, like a little bit like tired, a little bit jaded. It's like, I don't want to do another video conference. I don't want to do another like video call because everyone is doing that, so you have to kind of like figure out like, okay, what kind of like new content is going to keep people entertained? How do we change the format? Things like that I think is a big challenge for anyone living in these times. But at the end of the day, it's part of the challenge. I am looking forward to the time that we can start like doing again conferences. Is going to be a little bit refreshing, and I think a lot of the ideas that we had for this year, that we're going to jump to start executing on that. But yeah, it's a day-to-day thing, and personally, I have felt obviously the change like everyone else, but I've been working remotely for over 7 years, so it was not like a huge process of adaptation. I think it was more for you, for example.
Exactly, yeah. So our team is based in the Bay Area, Northern California. Diego works remotely in Atlanta. So yeah, I can totally understand that you kind of already had your setup. For us, it was a little bit more of a shock because we no longer went into the office. We all kind of had to put together our home offices. I was fortunate because I had done it for, close to 20 years. So I still had my nice little setup here at home. So it's worked out well. I would agree with you that one of the biggest impacts has been that face-to-face opportunity to meet with designers and developers at conferences. That's, we're missing out on that. You are correct. When the new year began, our big push was, hey, how can we broaden our reach? How can we make our teachings, our information accessible globally? So we were already, 5 steps ahead towards that type of content delivery. Like you said, we just had to put it in gear and move a little faster once this all hit.
Yeah.
When I think of Diego, I think of a tech guy. Like I said, I'm totally impressed with how much knowledge you have, up in your head there. Did that start as a child? I mean, were you always like motivated by technology when you were a little kid?
I don't know if by technology itself. I think it was a little bit of like knowledge. I think my entire life I've been quite geeky. So there are some people that kind of like find that term offensive. It's like, no, I've always kind of like known that I'm geeky and I embraced it. So it's like, I really have, perhaps I have a little bit of OCD, and it's like, okay, if I get to know something, I just really love to learn about it. So that helped. And really, the thing is that for me, most of the programming, especially, it comes as a problem. It's like you have a problem in some, or almost like puzzle, and then the coding is really the process of solving that puzzle. So it gives me a lot of like almost personal pleasure, to see like, okay, I want to do X, and I have no idea how to do it, and then I start putting it together and solving it. The big difference as being an evangelist is that many developers stop there. Then you solve the problem and then perhaps move to the next problem. As an evangelist, you are supposed to kind of like take that knowledge and somehow figure out to share it with someone else. So it could be a blog post, it could be a podcast, like what we're doing right now, or it could be a video, but then you have to do that part of sharing what you learn, and that is also kind of like an additional layer of liking what I do. And apart from that, like you mentioned about like being a gamer or being a programmer, really, the funny thing is that I actually started learning how to program because I wanted to create games. So that was really my main motivation. But back then in Colombia, I didn't really have any degree available to me, at least on game programming, game designing. And so I said like, okay, I'm going to do the closest thing, that is learn how to program. And I started a career there. And then the gaming part kind of like came pretty much later. But it was kind of like a really roundabout way to get around things. But it's kind of like the path. Sometimes you don't even like have a lot of control on how you end up getting to the place that you want to be in.
That's great. So let me ask you then, what is the perfect game for you? Are you into action games, role playing games, puzzles, sports? I mean, what is that perfect game for you?
Role-playing games.
Yeah.
Role-playing games. I enjoy all kinds. I really suck at action games. So all the shooters, I think my brain has kind of like a disconnect on 3D on a screen. So I try to shoot in one direction and I'm kind of like getting killed in the other direction. I cannot really coordinate that. But role-playing games, it has always been kind of like my thing because they usually tend to have a story, something engaging, and at the same time you have the interactive part. So to me it feels almost as a real interactive book, and then having like to develop that story and trying to figure out how all the characters interact and making this story a little bit my own story. That's like one of the things that I really like. Obviously, like I said, I don't have the time sometimes to kind of like go into this deep story. So right now I'm not doing a lot. But if you ask me like what are like my favorite games, pretty much all of them are role-playing games. So like Final Fantasy VI, Fable, and one of the latest ones that I didn't play the original one. It was my kid that ended up picking it for Switch. Zelda, the Breath of the Wild. And that thing totally blew me away. I still haven't finished it because it takes so many hours and I cannot just do like the main path for the game. I have to do all the side quests and that takes forever. So if they go in one of these online sites and tell you like, hey, this game is going to be 100 hours. If it's a role-playing game for me, that's going to be 300 hours. So I cannot just do the main quest. So yeah, like I think role-playing games is really the thing that is close to my heart. But they're complicated to create and there are some that are much more engaging than others. But yeah.
That's funny. You know, I can tell you, this is where we're the opposite. I am not into role-playing games. I need games simple. So I am into racing games. So, you know, speed is pretty much it. Or like, you know, just the simple arcade style games, the old retro games, 2 dots, you know, just these really simple puzzles. Yeah, that's about as deep as I get when it comes to gaming.
Well, but believe it or not, like when I actually create games, those arcade games are the ones that I really go for because usually it's about a mechanic. They can have like 1 or 2 mechanics that are incredibly polished and they're repetitive, but then it really gives you the satisfaction as a player to accomplish something. So like a platformer or like the typical thing of like Space Invaders that you just really get in the zone and your brain is not really kind of like thinking much, it's just kind of like reacting. Those are also great. You know, yeah. And especially the old school games. Oh man, I don't know how many hours I spent growing up like playing those. And in an actual arcade, not even at home, in an arcade.
Yes, much of my childhood was spent down at what was called Merlin's Castle, down in Saratoga in California. That was the place to be every night. We would go down there and drop our quarters in and play Asteroids until the place closed. So I'm going to actually date myself here for a moment. When I was growing up, one of my friends, his father worked on the very first game, which was Pong. Very well known that this is the very first, you know, computer-generated game. He actually brought it home before it was publicly released. He's like, you got to come over here. I've got this game that you hook up to our television. So I actually got to play Pong before it was out into the public and what launched obviously this amazing genre of games.
I would have lived in the house of your friend if that like I would have tried to break in somehow and while everyone is sleeping try to just play in their living room or whatever they have the game. So that is a little bit of an addiction that I had growing up. But it was kind of like the cool thing. It was not the thing that it was like, let's escape and let's do this really cool thing for a few hours and then let's go back to the 80s, well, in my case, the 80s reality that was around me. And then, let's go and check the next game, you know? So it was really cool. And somehow I think those simpler games, in many ways were kind of like more fun than some of the others. I think people didn't take them as seriously. They were just still games. It was not kind of like the entire thing, like my life revolves only around these games. It was
Sure.
like, well, they are incredibly cool, but I know how to kind of like separate the two. So I think the perhaps like the entire thing that you begin to listen that are like simpler times. So perhaps they were in video games, at least they were simpler, and I think their interaction that you had with the players were simpler too. So, but
Yeah,
they were cool, you know?
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. So if we could then jump into the future, how do you think, or how would you like to see games evolve?
Now you do see the trend already of the esports. So they are going to turn more into kind of like a sport, so like a global entertainment. So just watching the game is going to be part of the entertainment, which I don't particularly like, because I think one of the coolest things about games is playing the games, you know. But well, I've also enjoyed watching some people like really cool ones, really good ones, what they do doing that. But I think you're going to kind of like have, it's kind of weird to say it, on one extreme, like more complex, more technically advanced games, and then on the other hand, you're going to have the hyper casual. When we start getting like even more and more mainstream technologies like AR and VR, then you're going to start having like more of those games that are going to get to the general public, not just like gamers, but kind of like everyone else, and then more gamified experiences. So then you're going to have things that, I don't know, you could go to the store and directly on the stands, you're going to be able to have like mini games, you know, because it's going to be so simple that you pretty much can put a game on anything, like in the wrapping of, I don't know, candy or something like that. It's going to be possible. And then some of these interactions at some point is going to be similar to what happened to technology in general. They're just going to be in so many places that at some point you're not even going to realize that you're just playing.
Sure.
They're going to be just so immersive and so commonplace that you're just going to be playing without realizing that you're playing, or you're going to be working with some gamified aspects. And I think all that obviously has some good aspects to that, and some aspects that we should reconsider as society. But well, that's not really up to me to decide what's right and what's wrong. But I think those are going to be kind of like the main things that we're going to see more and more.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. You know, my son's a gamer, and when he's not gaming, I'm like, okay, cool. He's off, you know, the game, and he's just chilling out. And then I'm like, so what are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm just watching videos of other people gaming. And that's when I realized, I'm like, oh my gosh. So there's this whole, you know, social community around gaming that is more than just individuals playing the game. I mean, there's just so much to the community. So that was interesting. So let's talk a little bit about building apps. You know, I want to know what your approach is when you want to develop an app. Do you first like outline what the concept is, or do you just start like playing with the code and then kind of build out from there? What's your approach to that?
Usually for me, it has been at least have a problem, or have like at least a concept, you know, that I build the app around. So it could be I'm trying to solve something, or somehow I was able to, for example, with games, that happens a lot, that I already have a game mechanic that I really like, and I say like, where is it going to fit? So usually I don't just kind of like start playing. I usually start playing with the code when I already have like a skeleton, like a base that is there, and then it's like, okay, let's figure out like all the other aspects, the ones that may not be as important. How can I do that? Still, obviously, to solve that initial core concept or that initial problem, solving it, you end up kind of like trying different approaches. But usually, and that's something that I do in many other things, I like to at least have an outline. You know, like grab a piece of paper and say like, I want to do A, B, Z, and C, and then try to figure out how to do that. And then that may evolve, or then may stay into those original ideas. But usually I like it. I prefer it when there's something that guides me, like an end goal, even if it ends up changing, but at least have a general idea where I'm going.
So tell me about some tools or tips that you may have that you could recommend for someone creating their first game app.
Well, for games, so I have kind of like a couple of things that I can share. So for games in general, I think one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that games can be sometimes hard to program. So I have like 2 tools for a person that has no idea on how to create games that I recommend. And the first one is Construct 3. I think that we can put the link on the notes. So the company is called Zera. And you can create games like JavaScript games that are going to run on your browser, and you don't really need to do a lot of programming. So it gives you a good idea of how to start creating games without doing a lot of the understanding what goes behind. So that's really good. If you already have a little bit of experience programming or want to learn how to program, I also would recommend something like Phaser. That is also a JavaScript game, but you do have to write the code. So it gives you the idea. If you're going to kind of like teach a kid, perhaps then you can find things like Scratch. So those are a little bit more visual programming languages, and it helps you to understand like a lot of the logic on how ifs, whiles, loops, things that you still need in programs in general, in apps in general, and specifically for games. If you're kind of like trying to create a new app, well, the game is a good way to do it, but there are like several places that you can learn how to do some programming. I think JavaScript is really great, not just because of the language itself, but it's because you can find it almost anywhere. Whenever you visit a website, usually it has a little bit of JavaScript. So I know that a lot of people are going to complain and say like, no, it's better to start with Python, or it's better to start with other programming languages. But I think for someone that is starting to learn how to program, is really easy to create a piece of code with Notepad and then immediately run it using a browser. So you don't need a lot of tools, and you can see results right away. And it's so extended. You can find so many resources like, I don't know, freecodecamp.org or W3 Schools, that they give you a lot of tutorials on how to start creating. And those are kind of general. Now, if you are a little bit more experienced and perhaps you know how to code and you want to create, let's say, your first like big game, Unity is a great way to go about it. It could be a little bit hard at the beginning because it has so many options. It has so many buttons. The UI is a little bit complicated. So if you open it for the first time and you don't know what you're doing, just go to YouTube or go to one of the Unity pages, because you're going to be overwhelmed. So that's why I'm saying, like, I think it's a great tool. It's just that if it's your first game, you may be a little bit like, whoa. So that would be a good thing. And if you're going to start creating apps in general, well, I would recommend to start creating something with Android. So it could be Android Studio, or even with Tizen, or for Samsung, that it could be like you could go to tizen.org or the developer.samsung.com page, and you are going to also have the chance to start creating mobile applications or applications for smartwatches. And well, even like if you just want to see something with the smartwatches, I know that follow Tony, because he's going to give you a lot of places where you can go. And well, I think I'm going to share with Tony like a lot of other things that developers, that are kind of like tips and things that you can use. So places like if you are like most developers, a little bit design challenged, that you could find like cool images like pixels, or game art that is open game art, or if you want to just kind of like find like colors, the right colors for your UI, you could go to a place like it's Coolors, not colors, but coolors.co, and immediately gives you like a palette that you can use in your application. So right now there are fortunately a lot of resources that you can find online, and well, quite likely we can put some of the links in the notes.
Definitely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So as you had mentioned, we'll include everything in the show notes. You're giving a lot of great information, a lot of great resources. So we will link to all of that down in the show notes. So thank you a bunch for that. So one thing that's been wonderful, you joining the team, is you speak Spanish. So you've been able to reach out to the Spanish-speaking community. You've had some very successful live chats and webinars that you conduct all in Spanish. So, and our reach is global. So as you know, when we're doing our live chats, our videos and whatnot, they are reaching countries all around the world. So I want to ask you, how do you think the developer communities differ around the world?
I think it's a little bit of a level of engagement, like in the US in particular, a lot of the technical content is already created in English, so sometimes it's really easy for a developer or anyone that wants to be a developer, just go online and search for whatever, and you immediately are going to find a response, it's right there. In other places, especially places where English may not be kind of like as extended, then it could be a little bit more of like people that really want to get the answers. Those are the ones that somehow or have to learn English or try to kind of like understand more of the content that is there. But also sometimes even they are the ones that try to translate. They figure out like, hey, I found this awesome video and no one has that in Spanish or in Chinese or in Hindi, and then they recreate that same content. So I think it's a matter of kind of like availability of tools and resources, and sometimes you see a little bit more of those dynamics in user groups, so a lot of people kind of like some are more motivated by that, and others on the other hand feel a little bit more shy. It's kind of like, well, I know that I'm not going to get all the responses that I needed. So you have to kind of like work around that whenever you're kind of like reaching other countries and people from other languages. But yeah, it's really interesting. And also you see that sometimes certain technologies are more popular in certain countries, and sometimes you don't even understand why. It's like, why that programming language is so popular in Brazil. I don't know, but it is more popular in Brazil, or websites and things like that, because, well, the different communities evolve differently.
Sure. So my specialty is design. So I help a lot of developers from the design aspect for their apps. And I'm always amazed at how many Russian watch face designers there are. So when I've been communicating with them, exchanging emails or responding to different posts and whatnot, I'm conducting all of this in English and we're having these great conversations. Well, I reached out to a couple of them the other day to invite them onto a phone call, and came to find out that they don't speak English. They've just been using Google Translate in their comments.
Exactly.
It just hit me, and I'm like, so for all these months that we've been carrying these conversations, this has all just been Russian translated using Google Translate, though.
Exactly.
It was pretty neat to see the borders really, taken down.
Yeah, and exactly. So sometimes certain content like videos, I personally prefer videos, but then in other places they may prefer the text, or code, because it's something that you can easily copy paste somewhere else and get the translation. So in a video, you may not get the accent, or your understanding of the language is not as great. So then you still can have like a barrier there. But well, people, if they really want to do it, if they really want to kind of like get to the content, they figure it out. It's just like how they solve that problem could add like a couple of steps there in the process.
So we've talked a lot about conferences. We used to do a lot of outreach in person. So can you tell me about some of the experiences you've had at these conferences? Have you had, great experiences? Have you had any challenging experiences? Tell me about maybe unique people that you might have met at some of these conferences.
Yeah. So I'll tell you one like that was challenging. That was not with Samsung. But I was going to man a booth in a conference for another company, and we had a product, and this is kind of like the entire thing about demos. Whenever you have some product, if you don't pay attention or if you don't cross your fingers long enough, sometimes the demo is going to fail. And they told me like, okay, the conference, let's say, starts Tuesday, 9 a.m. And I came there early, set up everything is ready to go. And I put my computer there to show the product, everything is working, and then suddenly it's not working. So I had like half an hour before people started like coming to the floor, and that I had to show things. And I literally had to kind of like go outside of the conference floor and I start pretty much figuring out what was the error. And at some point I was kind of like calling someone from the team and trying to figure out. It was, of course, the most stupid thing, like a package got updated last minute automatically, and then that one had a conflict with something else, and then you just kind of like change one file and magically everything is working. But it's incredibly stressful to try to solve something like right before you have to show it. And I have had some things like that, even in webinars and things like that. And you are like, what do I do now? And you have to figure out like the solution right then. But that one was kind of like really stressful for me. Really cool ones, on the other hand, for example, in Adobe Max, which you were last year. So like a good portion of our team was there last year. I had the chance to talk with a really cool developer. So his name is Derek Miller, and he went back and talked with us. And what really blew me away for once is that, well, he's a teacher. I have his video. That's something that we never really share outside of our team, because we wanted to really give it the promotion that we wanted, but it was a little bit hard sometimes to promote some of these things. But the thing is that he had a real life problem. Sometimes we're talking about apps and games and really, well, if a game does work or doesn't work, usually doesn't change anyone's life. But in his case, he was dealing with diabetes, and he wanted to be able to have, well, pretty much a regular life and figure out how to do it. Use technology, because he knows how to use technology. He teaches a lot of like maker things, so things with Raspberry Pis and things like that. And pretty much he designed and implemented a full system to be able to check his level, his blood level, like glucose and everything to be kind of like in a regular, stable state, regardless if he was on the road or if he was changing his diet, etc., etc. So he kind of like told us all about that, and he was using Samsung technologies, and I was blown away. Again, because at the time, it's one of those things, since I don't have that disease, I don't have that problem, that health problem, I never thought about that, like how to solve it. And then he was already explaining like, hey, I did this, and I kind of created a case for my sensor, and this is how I connected my phone. And I was asking him, like, how long did it take you? He's like, oh, well, like 1 or 2 days. And I was like, really? It would take me forever for me to do that, and it is because obviously he had a personal need, and he had a personal problem, a real life problem, and he really wanted to put his knowledge into something that could be used by him or by anyone else. And he figured it out without even having kind of like a commercial solution for that. And he was still able to figure it out. So that was one of the times that I figured and that I got kind of like a personal satisfaction to see someone using their knowledge to solve a real problem. And it was amazing. And it was, again, randomly. We were in a design conference that is Adobe Max last year. It was not even about just programming. It was more towards like the design part. And he just came to our booth, to be able to talk with us and show us the kind of things that he was doing. So that one really blew me away.
That's great. I think that for me, I've had a few of those experiences where I've met some just really unique people, from the design community, since that's been my primary focus, whether it's meeting individuals that are just happen to be coming by our booth, or meeting some of the other people who are at the conference to present. I've met some of what I call like my rock star designers in the community out there. Andrew Kramer, who's done a lot of work with motion graphics. He worked a lot on Star Wars. I follow him. He was the one who truthfully, his tutorial videos are what inspired me to get into motion graphics many years ago.
Wow.
And here I was at a conference right next to him. And next thing you know, we're starting up in a conversation, and we must have chatted for about 30 minutes, just the two of us chatting away. And I just still couldn't believe it that I was, next to him. Mr. Doodle, who's an amazing artist. He was at Adobe Max. So just being able to see these people in person was just so rewarding. I can't wait for us to get back out into conferences, to get back into that environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the cool things that you asked me before about this kind of role. Sometimes you end up talking with some people that you don't know that have such an amazing experience. So personally for me, you can share this one, right? I've always kind of like been into, like I said, role-playing games, but also games are not just like the video games, like also tabletop games. And there is this one that is Vampire the Masquerade. So it's kind of like Dungeons and Dragons, but kind of like darker, grittier, because it was the 90s. And I was a real fan, and I came here to Georgia. I had the books, I played that, and I didn't know that game actually started here in Atlanta. And at some point, someone told me, like, hey, you should kind of like talk with Andrew. Sure. And his name is Andrew Greenberg. And right now he's the president of the Georgia Game Developer Association. So he helps like video game developers, but also tabletop game developers and a lot of people in the gaming industry and entertainment industry. And I started talking with him. And then later, I found out that he was one of the original developers, not the creator, but one of the original developers of this game. So it's one game that I've been kind of like fanning out for I don't know how many years since I was a teenager. And then I was able to kind of like meet someone that literally was in the offices creating the content that I was reading and all that. And you don't know in these conferences or like when you go to user groups who you're going to be able to find. And it could be like someone that already has a lot of experience, or it could be someone that 15 years from now could be the next, Maven, the next genius, game creator or app creator. And you don't know. Sure. And that's why I really love to talk with people, because that's when you make these connections.
Yeah, no, definitely. Which then leads me to hackathons and game jams. So we've talked a lot about conferences and some of our outreach. Let's get specific and talk about hackathons. What's your involvement around that?
Yeah, so a hackathon is pretty much, usually they have this format of let's get during a weekend or let's get for a few days and let's put together an application or a system or do some coding to create something cool. Sometimes the hackathon could have like a theme. So let's create something around a specific technology or like an API, or let's create something to solve this problem. Or it could be something more specific, which it would be like a game jam, what it would be. So a game jam is kind of like, let's get together, and instead of having a music jam where we're creating cool things that sound cool, it would be let's create some games that look cool and play cool. So sometimes they end up creating like a small games. Other times they are a little bit more polished, but usually everything is created in that span of 48, 72 hours. Sometimes the orders are a little bit longer, like half a week or something like that. But there's always this entire element of pressure of let's be creative, like pretty much on the moment, and let's meet people that we haven't met before. So sometimes some teams kind of like form right there on the spot. I've been able to kind of like participate in many of those. Some are a little bit more professional, more enterprise side of things. Others in universities or game associations. For example, usually around the end of January, they have the Global Game Jam. So I had the chance to go there and sometimes sponsor and sometimes talk with people. I always kind of like end up like not participating myself, creating that. I always kind of like start creating like a concept that I'm going to end up doing, and I end up doing something else. So it doesn't work out. But it's really great to go and see the results of the apps that people create at hackathons or the games and the people at game jams. And that's something that brings a lot of energy from young people creating cool things together.
Yeah. And I think that probably what I enjoy the most around that is everybody there they're all there for like the same reason, you know what I mean? And it's to be creative. I one time participated in a 48-hour film project. So this is where different teams break up and you have 48 hours to put together a film. And so you're writing your script, you're filming it, you're editing it, you're doing everything all within 48 hours. And just being around like-minded people. So I can totally understand that when you're at a game jam or at a hackathon, just being around the energy of all those people. I mean, that's got to be pretty exciting.
Yeah. And sometimes people come up with like some things that you're like, how did you even came up with that idea? And it's really cool. So, and last year with Samsung, we had one in Washington, D.C. That one was created in conjunction with MIT, and it was around health and coming up with like ideas to help people in the health industry and the health sector to, well, help people that, well, have actual diseases, health problems, etc., etc. And we were able to talk with some teams that were coming up with so many incredible solutions. One team was kind of like checking the smartwatches, the Samsung smartwatches, and had to do with elderly care. So like trying to check things around how it could detect someone falling, someone that is elder and could be falling, and then the gyroscope in the watch could help with that detection, or how they could collect information like like the heartbeats or the sleep patterns, things like that. So they were kind of like saying like, we already have this awesome hardware, how do we do that, how do we use that to help others? And I thought that it was incredibly interesting. And usually you don't do anything that has to do with health. So that particular hackathon was kind of like, oh, that's different. But yeah, that's the entire point, to bring some creativity and bring like two different things that sometimes don't go along and put them to work together.
Yeah, no, that's so true. I once went to a meetup group where people were presenting their apps. And somebody had created an app for the elderly, the chance of them falling down. And this person had worked their way through this app, not realizing that when people fall, they don't fall like a tree falling in the forest. They crumble. And so this app developer hadn't really thought of that the motion is not, a tree falling. It's just someone kind of collapsing down. And that was because of the people that were in attendance at that meetup group that then helped this app developer, understand kind of a basic thing, that it was just an oversight.
Yeah, but I don't think it's even an oversight. Is that sometimes that happens a lot with developers, and you can see it with a lot of technologies that then they have to be adapted. And it has to do with that. Sometimes developers end up solving problems that don't really exist, or that the problem is something different.
So you've done a great job on reaching out to the community and sharing your knowledge. I know one of your very popular series is the Tyson Tidbits that you've been publishing on YouTube. Can you tell us, are there any other upcoming topics that you have planned?
Yeah, actually, it's kind of fun, like how these things work. And I'm coming back a little bit more towards the gaming side of things. So I'm going to be putting a little bit more like short videos on showing how to create games with Samsung technologies. And in general, I'll try to put like different technologies. So right now we have so many technologies that you can use, so many platforms like Phaser, Construct 2 that I mentioned before, and Unity. And so it would be cool to solve the specific things that have to do with games, and then how to publish them. Because I think sometimes when you are creating a game or an app, if you are not forced to share it with others, then it can stall. Otherwise, if you know that you want to publish it in the app, regardless if it's successful or not, you still have kind of like almost a goal to achieve, that is sharing like that game. So that's where quite likely I'm going to start creating, and I actually have to finish a video in the next couple of days around that. So we'll see how that goes. So
that's great.
I already have like a few that I need to record, but well, I have to start one by one. So we will see how long it takes me to create them and publish them.
So if developers want to get in contact with you, what is the best way?
Well, they can go directly if it's especially something technical. It's great to send me an email, and you can use my Samsung email. So you're going to see it on the notes. That's diego.rivera@partner.samsung.com. So like quite likely it's better that you check the notes. So you can send me an email there. And specifically if you're talking about an error, it's great that you send me like a screenshot. Sometimes people describe the error and it's like, well, that's really not giving me a lot of information. A screenshot sometimes works best. If not, they still can find me online. So the best thing, usually I go by Hielo777. So that would be like the translation of ice in Spanish. So that's HIELO LO777, and you can find me like that on Twitter and on Instagram, etc., etc. So Twitter, I receive a lot of messages, so I can respond directly there. And if not, like I said, my email, that's a good way to get in contact with me.
When you are not coding, when you are not working, what do you do for fun?
Spending time with my family. I have a big family, so literally get some popcorn, get in front of the TV and watch an animated movie. I have still like little kids, so we're still not at the age where we can all just watch like people on the screen. They still have to be cartoons. At some point we will graduate to real people, live action, but in the meantime is that or going on some road trips. So I'm kind of fortunate that around the area we have many other smaller cities and towns that we can visit, and every other month we are kind of like going somewhere. So that with my family, that's its own adventure, just like taking them 1 hour down the road. That's still interesting.
Excellent. Well, hey, Diego, absolutely appreciate you taking the time to join me on the podcast. This has been a ton of fun. I am glad to even get to know you better than I knew you before. So thank you again.
Oh, thank you, Tony.
Looking to start creating for Samsung? Download the latest tools to code your next app. Or get software for designing apps without coding at all. Sell your apps to the world on the Samsung Galaxy Store. Check out developer.samsung.com today and start your journey with Samsung.
The PAL Podcast is brought to you by the Samsung Developer Program and produced by Tony Moreland.